The bridge of the UFS Discovery hummed with quiet activity as Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the morning reports. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he barely noticed as he studied the navigation chart spread across his command console. The Discovery had been exploring the Outer Rim territories for 6 months now, mapping new star systems and searching for signs of intelligent life beyond the known galactic borders. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her communication station, her headset crackling with the usual background static of deep space. She had been monitoring the long-range channels for 3 days, without picking up anything more interesting than stellar radiation and cosmic background noise. Her shift was nearly over when something made her pause. A faint signal was bleeding through the static, so weak she almost missed it entirely. Amy adjusted her equipment and filtered out the background interference. The signal became clearer, though still barely audible. It was definitely artificial, not natural stellar phenomena. More importantly, it was broadcasting on the universal emergency frequency that all spacefaring civilizations had agreed to use for distress calls. Her training kicked in immediately. Captain Morrison, I am picking up something on emergency channel 7. It is very weak, but definitely a distress signal. Morrison looked up from his charts and walked over to Amy's station. Tell me what you have. Amy played the signal through the bridge speakers. The transmission was broken and filled with gaps, but the pattern was unmistakable. Someone was calling for help. The language was completely unknown, unlike anything in their translation databases. But the emergency frequency and the desperate tone needed no interpretation. Where is it coming from? Morrison asked. Amy checked her instruments twice before answering. The signal is originating from the Kepler 4142 system, sir. That puts it deep in the dead zone. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew about the dead zone. It was a region of space that had been devastated by an ancient war between two powerful alien civilizations called the Zephyrians and the Korthan Empire. The conflict had raged for decades before both sides had nearly destroyed each other completely. What remained was a wasteland of irradiated planets, unstable gravity wells, and automated weapons systems that still fired at anything that moved. Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's chief science officer, had been reviewing stellar data at her station when she heard the discussion. She joined the group around Amy's console. Captain, that system has been declared off-limits by the Galactic Council for over 50 years. No one goes there anymore. Morrison studied the signal analysis on Amy's screen. The transmission was weak, which meant either the source was very far away or the equipment sending it was badly damaged. Given the location, he suspected it was probably both. How old is this signal, Amy? Amy ran quick calculations based on the distance and signal strength, based on propagation delay and signal degradation. I estimate this transmission is approximately 6 hours old. If there are survivors, they were alive 6 hours ago. The captain called for his senior staff to gather on the bridge. Within minutes, Navigation Officer Tony Walsh had joined them along with Chief Tactical Officer Ben Carter and Engineer Ryan Cooper. Morrison explained the situation quickly and asked for options. Tony Walsh was the first to speak. Sir, reaching the Kepler 442 system would require us to travel through the most dangerous part of the dead zone. We would have to navigate around radiation fields, debris clouds, and those ancient automated defense platforms. I can plot a course, but I cannot guarantee we would make it there intact. How dangerous are we talking? Morrison asked. Walsh consulted his navigation computer. Based on our current knowledge of the hazards in that region, I would estimate our chances of reaching the system safely at approximately 60%. The return journey would be equally risky. Dr. Park had been analyzing the signal during their discussion. Captain, I have been studying the transmission pattern. The signal is definitely coming from survivors, and based on the frequency modulation, I believe they are trapped on a planetary body with low gravity. Most likely one of the moons orbiting Kepler 442b. Ben Carter looked uncomfortable. Sir, we should also consider that this could be some kind of trap. There are stories about automated systems in the dead zone that mimic distress calls to lure ships into weapon range. Dr. Park shook her head. The signal patterns are too complex and too random to be artificial. This is definitely from living beings in genuine distress. Morrison walked to the main view screen and stared out at the stars. Behind him, his crew waited for his decision. He knew what Earth Command would say about this situation. The dead zone was forbidden territory. Entering it would be a direct violation of their orders. If they survived the journey and returned, he would face a court-martial for endangering his ship and crew. But someone was out there calling for help. Someone who had been waiting for rescue for who knew how long. Someone who probably thought they had been forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. Amy spoke up quietly. "Captain, the signal is getting weaker. If there are survivors, their equipment is failing. They may not have much time." Morrison had served in Starfleet for 15 years. He had commanded the Discovery for 3 of those years, and in all that time he had never abandoned anyone who needed help. He was not about to start now, regardless of what the regulations said. He turned back to his crew. "Tony, plot a course for the Kepler 442 system. Take us through the safest route you can find, but get us there as fast as possible." "Sir," Walsh said carefully, "Earth Command has specifically ordered all ships to avoid the dead zone. If we do this, there will be consequences." Morrison nodded. "I understand the risks, but there are people out there who need our help. We did not join Starfleet to follow safe orders. We joined to explore, to help, and to make sure that no one is left behind when they need rescue." Ryan Cooper spoke up. "Captain, if we are going into the dead zone, I recommend we modify our shields and power systems. The radiation levels will be intense and we may encounter unknown energy phenomena." "Do whatever you need to do," Morrison replied. "Dr. Park, I want continuous analysis of that signal. If it changes or stops, I need to know immediately." Amy continued monitoring the transmission. The signal was indeed getting weaker, but it was still there. Somewhere in that forbidden region of space, people were waiting for help that everyone else had given up on sending. As the Discovery changed course toward the dead zone, Morrison made an entry in his captain's log. He knew this decision might end his career, but he also knew it was the right thing to do. That was what separated humans from many other species in the galaxy. When faced with a choice between safety and doing what was right, humans consistently chose to help others, even at great personal cost. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared for the dangerous journey ahead. None of them questioned the captain's decision. They all understood what it meant to be human in a galaxy that often forgot the value of individual life. The UFS Discovery shuddered as it entered the outer edge of the dead zone. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship's hull groaned under the stress of navigating through fields of radioactive debris left over from the ancient war. The view screen showed a hellish landscape of twisted metal, dead planets, and the ghostly remains of once mighty battleships drifting like monuments to a forgotten conflict. Engineer Ryan Cooper worked frantically at his station as warning lights flashed across his control panels. "Captain, our shields are holding, but the radiation levels are higher than expected. I am rerouting power from non-essential systems to boost our defensive screens." Navigation Officer Tony Walsh plotted their course through the hazardous region with extreme care. Every few minutes he had to adjust their heading to avoid chunks of debris or pockets of unstable space where reality itself seemed twisted by exotic weapons. "Sir, we are making progress, but I'm having to take a longer route than planned. The direct path is blocked by what appears to be an artificial gravity well." Dr. Lisa Park monitored her sensors as they pushed deeper into the forbidden zone. The readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. "Captain, these energy signatures are incredible. Whatever weapons were used in this war, they were far beyond anything we have encountered before. Some of these radiation patterns suggest the use of planet-killing devices." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez continued tracking the distress signal as it grew stronger with their approach. The transmission was becoming clearer, though the language remained completely unknown. "Captain, I am starting to pick up multiple voices in the signal. There are definitely survivors down there, and it sounds like more than just a few people." Medical Officer Dr. Patricia Hill prepared her sickbay for potential casualties. She had studied what little information existed about the species that had fought in this region, but most of their medical data had been lost when their civilizations collapsed. She would have to improvise treatments for alien physiology she had never encountered before. As they approached the Kepler 442 system, the devastation became even more apparent. The star itself flickered with an unnatural light, its output destabilized by weapons that had torn apart the very fabric of space around it. Several planets were nothing more than asteroid fields, completely destroyed in the ancient conflict. Tony Walsh guided them toward the 4th planet in the system, a gas giant that had somehow survived the war intact. However, its moons told a different story. Most were cracked and broken. their surfaces scarred by impact craters and radiation burns. The distress signal was coming from the largest moon, which appeared to be barely holding together. Dr. Park analyzed the readings from the moon's surface. "Captain, the signal is originating from what looks like a series of underground shelters. The survivors have been living in a network of caves and tunnels beneath the surface. From the structural scans, it appears they have been there for quite some time." Morrison studied the tactical display, showing the moon's orbit around the gas giant. The entire system was unstable, with gravitational anomalies that made approach dangerous. "How many survivors are we talking about, Amy?" Amy fine-tuned her equipment to get a clearer reading on the life signs. "Sir, I am detecting approximately 200 individual life forms. But Captain, the readings are showing multiple different species. This is not just one group of survivors." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Finding survivors was one thing, but discovering that multiple alien species were somehow coexisting in this wasteland was unexpected. According to all historical records, the Zephyrians and Corthans had been bitter enemies who could barely tolerate being in the same star system, let alone sharing shelter. Chief Tactical Officer Ben Carter monitored the weapon systems as they approached the moon. "Sir, I am detecting automated defense platforms throughout this system. Most appear to be inactive, but several are showing power signatures. We need to be very careful about how we approach." Morrison made the decision to hail the survivors directly. "Amy, can you open a channel using the emergency frequency?" Amy worked to establish communication with the source of the distress signal. After several attempts, a voice came through the static. The translator system struggled with the unknown language, but the tone was unmistakably one of surprise and disbelief. Dr. Park worked with the translation computers to decode the incoming transmission. "Captain, the computer is having trouble with the language, but I think they are asking who we are and why we came." Morrison took a deep breath and activated the communication system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel UFS Discovery. We received your distress signal and have come to help. Can you understand us?" There was a long pause before the response came back. This time the voice was different, speaking in what sounded like a completely different language. The translator caught fragments, words that seemed to express shock and amazement that anyone had actually responded to their calls for help. Amy managed to establish a clearer connection. "Captain, I think I am getting through to them. They seem to have translation equipment of their own. They are asking if we are really here to rescue them." Morrison replied immediately. "Yes, we are here to get you out. How many of you are there and what is your situation?" The response came back stronger this time, with the alien translation systems apparently adapting to human speech patterns. "We are refugees from the Great War. Zephyrians, Corthans, and others who were caught between the armies when the fighting began. We have been trapped here for 57 of your Earth years." Dr. Park looked stunned. "Captain, if they have been here for over 50 years, that means some of these survivors were alive during the actual war. They would have first-hand knowledge of what happened here." The alien voice continued, now clearly speaking through their translation systems. "We never thought anyone would come. The galaxy forgot about us long ago. Most species declared this entire region dead and forbidden. Why did you risk coming here?" Morrison thought about his answer carefully, because someone had to. "We do not leave people behind when they need help." There was another long pause before the response came. "We do not understand. Your species is young and small compared to the great powers of the galaxy. Why would you risk your ship and crew for strangers you have never met?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Morrison replied simply. Pilot Commander Steve Johnson had been preparing the shuttle bay for rescue operations. "Captain, I have 3 shuttles ready for evacuation runs. But sir, approaching that moon is going to be dangerous. The gravitational fields are unstable, and there are still active defense systems in orbit." Morrison studied the tactical display. The moon was surrounded by a network of ancient weapons platforms, most dormant but several still powered and potentially hostile. Any rescue attempt would have to navigate through this defensive grid while dealing with the unstable gravity and radiation. Dr. Patricia Hill joined the bridge conference. "Captain, based on the communication, these survivors have been living in harsh conditions for decades. They will likely need immediate medical attention. I recommend we set up a temporary medical station on one of our cargo decks to handle the volume of patients." Ryan Cooper had been analyzing the power readings from the defensive grid. "Sir, those weapons platforms are running on some kind of automated system. They appear to be programmed to prevent ships from leaving the system rather than entering it. It is like they were designed to keep people trapped here. Morrison realized the full horror of what they had discovered. The survivors had not just been forgotten by the galaxy. They had been deliberately imprisoned by the weapons left behind by their own people, trapped in a radioactive wasteland with no hope of escape. The rescue operation had been underway for 3 hours when Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez detected the massive fleet approaching from the edge of the system. Her instruments showed dozens of ships moving in perfect formation, their energy signatures marking them as vessels from the Galactic Council's Enforcement Division. Captain Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as he realized what this meant. Amy turned from her console with worry written across her face. "Captain, we have incoming ships. It is a full enforcement fleet led by Admiral Kethmore of the Hegemony. They are broadcasting on all frequencies demanding that we cease rescue operations immediately." Morrison had been expecting this moment since they first entered the dead zone. Earth Command had undoubtedly reported the Discovery's unauthorized mission to the Galactic Council, and now the consequences were bearing down on them with military precision. "How long until they reach us?" Tony Walsh checked his navigation sensors. "At their current speed, approximately 2 hours, sir. But Captain, they are also deploying some kind of interdiction field. If they activate it, we will not be able to jump to hyperspace." Down on the moon's surface, Pilot Commander Steve Johnson had been coordinating the evacuation with the survivors' leaders. The refugees had organized themselves under 2 primary figures, who had somehow managed to overcome centuries of species hatred. Veltar was a scarred Zephyrian whose people had once ruled half the galaxy, while Threndock was a pragmatic Korthan whose empire had controlled the other half. Both leaders had lost everything in the war that destroyed their civilizations. Steve's shuttle touched down in a crater that served as the survivors' main gathering point. The sight that greeted him was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Aliens from species that had been mortal enemies were working together to help the injured and elderly prepare for evacuation. Children who had been born in this wasteland played together regardless of their different origins. Veltar approached the shuttle as Steve emerged. His translator spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "Human pilot, your people are the first to answer our calls in 57 years. We had given up hope that anyone would ever come." Steve began organizing the first group of evacuees, prioritizing the most injured and the youngest survivors. "We are going to get all of you out of here. That is a promise." Threndock joined them, his reptilian features showing skepticism despite his obvious gratitude. "Young human, you speak with confidence, but we have detected the approaching fleet. The Galactic Council considers this system forbidden. They will not allow you to complete this rescue." Steve continued loading passengers into his shuttle. "Then we better work fast." Back on the Discovery, Dr. Lisa Park had been analyzing the ancient defense grid that surrounded the moon. Her findings were disturbing. "Captain, I have completed my analysis of the weapons platforms. The system was designed to prevent anyone from leaving, not entering. It appears both sides in the war wanted to make sure their enemies could never escape this system." Chief Tactical Officer Ben Carter studied the defensive readings. "Sir, the platforms have enough power for one ship to pass through safely. After that, the grid will activate and destroy anything else that tries to leave. It is like they built a perfect prison." Morrison realized the full implications of their situation. The ancient enemies had created a system where survivors would be trapped forever, ensuring that neither side could rebuild their strength. Now, with the Galactic Council fleet approaching, the humans faced an impossible choice. Communications Officer Lieutenant Carlos Martinez established contact with the approaching fleet. Admiral Kethmore's voice filled the bridge, cold and commanding. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Galactic Council Resolution 847, which declares the Kepler 442 system off-limits to all spacefaring species. You will cease your illegal activities and withdraw immediately." Morrison stepped forward to respond. "Admiral, we are conducting a humanitarian rescue mission. There are 200 survivors down there who need immediate assistance." Admiral Kethmore's reply came without hesitation. "The dead zone contains nothing of value. If there were survivors, they would have been retrieved long ago by their own people. Your sensors are malfunctioning. Withdraw now or face the consequences." Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had all heard the communications with the survivors. They all knew that real people were counting on them for rescue. "Sir, with respect, our sensors are functioning perfectly." We are in direct communication with the survivors and we will not abandon them." There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. His voice carried the tone of someone dealing with particularly stubborn children. "Captain Morrison, you are young and your species is inexperienced in galactic affairs. You do not understand the greater picture. These refugees, if they exist, are the remnants of civilizations that nearly destroyed half the galaxy. They are exactly where they belong." Dr. Patricia Hill had been treating the first group of evacuees in the ship's medical bay. She joined the bridge conference to report her findings. "Captain, these people have been living in conditions that would kill most species. The fact that they have survived this long is remarkable. Many of them have radiation poisoning, malnutrition, and injuries that have never been properly treated." Engineer Ryan Cooper looked up from his calculations. "Sir, I have been working on the defense grid problem. If we overload our reactor and channel all the energy into the ship's deflector array, we might be able to create enough of a power surge to disable the weapons platforms temporarily." Morrison studied Cooper's plan on the engineering display. "What would that mean for our ship?" Cooper's expression was grim. The Discovery would be severely damaged, possibly destroyed, but there might be a brief window where multiple ships could escape the system. On the moon's surface, Steve Johnson was preparing his second shuttle load of evacuees when Veltar approached him with urgent news. "Human pilot, our sensors show that the ancient defense grid is beginning to activate. Your ship's presence has triggered some kind of automated response." Steve looked up at the sky where he could see energy beginning to arc between the orbiting weapons platforms. "How long do we have?" Threndok checked his equipment. "Perhaps 6 hours before the grid reaches full power. After that, nothing will be able to leave this system alive." Steve activated his communicator to contact the Discovery. "Captain, we have a problem down here. The defense grid is powering up. The survivors say we have maybe 6 hours before it becomes fully active." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, weighing their options. Admiral Kethmore's fleet would arrive in 2 hours. The defense grid would be active in 6, and they still had over 100 people to evacuate. Every choice led to someone being left behind. Amy Rodriguez had been monitoring the communications between the evacuees. "Captain, I am picking up conversations among the survivors. They are arguing about who should be evacuated first. But sir, they are not arguing about themselves. Each group is insisting that the others should go first." Morrison realized what he was hearing. These people, who had been enemies for generations, were now willing to sacrifice themselves to save each other. They had learned something in their 50 years of shared suffering that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Admiral Kethmore's voice came over the communication system again. "Captain Morrison, you have 1 hour to complete your withdrawal. After that, I will consider your vessel a threat to galactic security and respond accordingly." Morrison looked at his crew, then at the tactical display showing the approaching fleet and the activating defense grid. "We are not leaving anyone behind. We came here to rescue these people, and that is exactly what we are going to do." Engineer Ryan Cooper stared at the reactor display on his console as warning lights flashed red across the engineering section. His plan to overload the Discovery's power core was dangerous beyond anything he had ever attempted, but it was their only chance to save everyone. Captain Jake Morrison stood beside him as they reviewed the technical specifications one more time. Ryan pointed to the energy flow diagrams on his screen. "Captain, if we channel all reactor output through the deflector array and direct it at the central hub of the defense grid, the feedback should cascade through their entire network. The weapons platforms will shut down for approximately 8 minutes before their backup systems engage." Morrison studied the plan carefully. "What are our chances of survival if we do this?" Ryan was quiet for a moment before answering honestly. "Sir, the reactor overload will cause massive damage to our ship. We might lose life support, propulsion, and most of our systems. But if we time it right and execute Navigation Officer Walsh's gravitational slingshot maneuver around the star, we might just make it out alive." Dr. Lisa Park had been working with the ship's computer to model the complex physics involved in their escape plan. "Captain, I have run the calculations 17 times. The gravitational slingshot is possible, but the timing has to be perfect. We will have exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds to complete the maneuver after the defense grid goes down." Tony Walsh joined the discussion from his navigation station. "Sir, I have plotted the course we would need to follow. We will have to fly directly toward the system's star, use its gravity to accelerate beyond our normal engine capacity, and then swing back toward the edge of the system. The stress on our hull will be enormous. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez had been monitoring communications with the survivors on the moon's surface. Captain Veltar and Threndok are requesting permission to speak with you directly. They have information about the defense grid that might help. Morrison activated the communication channel to the moon. This is Captain Morrison. What can you tell us about those weapons platforms? Veltar's voice came through the translator with urgency. Captain, we have studied these systems for 57 years. The central control hub has a weak point in its shield matrix. If you target the lower frequency emitters with a concentrated energy burst, you can create a feedback loop that will shut down the entire grid temporarily. Threndok added his own technical knowledge. Human Captain, the shutdown will not last long. Our calculations suggest no more than 8 to 10 minutes before the backup systems restore power. But there is something else you must know. Morrison waited for the Korthan to continue. Threndok's voice carried a weight of sadness. The defense grid requires a massive energy signature to trigger its shutdown sequence. Your ship will be severely damaged, possibly destroyed. We cannot ask you to sacrifice yourselves for us. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Every single person was focused on their task, working to save people they had never met before today. Dr. Patricia Hill had left her medical bay to help coordinate the evacuation efforts. Chief Tactical Officer Ben Carter was calculating weapon trajectories. Everyone was committed to the rescue mission. We are not sacrificing ourselves, Morrison replied. We are doing our job. Stand by for evacuation completion. On the moon's surface, Pilot Commander Steve Johnson was loading the last group of evacuees into his shuttles. The process was taking longer than expected because the survivors kept insisting that others go before them. Families were separated as parents pushed their children toward the shuttles while staying behind. Themselves, Steve found himself talking to a young Zephyrian who could not have been more than 12 years old in human terms. The child was crying because her guardian, an elderly Korthan who had cared for her since her parents died, was too injured to make the journey to the shuttle. Steve looked at the old Korthan whose translator spoke in a weak voice. Young pilot, I am too damaged to survive the journey. Take the children and leave me here. I have lived longer than I had any right to expect. Steve shook his head firmly. Nobody gets left behind. That is not how humans do things. He carefully lifted the injured alien and carried him to the shuttle while the Zephyrian child held onto his arm. Around them, other humans from the Discovery's crew were doing the same thing, refusing to leave anyone behind regardless of their age, species, or condition. Back on the Discovery, Admiral Kethmore's fleet had reached the edge of the system and was beginning to deploy an attack formation. His final ultimatum came over the communication channels with cold authority. Captain Morrison, you have ignored direct orders from the Galactic Council. I am now authorized to use force to stop your illegal activities. You have 5 minutes to surrender. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system to address his entire crew. All hands, this is the captain. In 5 minutes, we are going to attempt something that has never been tried before. We are going to rescue every single person on that moon and get them safely out of this system. I will not lie to you about the risks. We might not survive this mission. But if we succeed, we will have done something that matters. He paused for a moment before continuing. Each of you has a choice to make. Anyone who wants to transfer to an escape pod before we begin the operation has my permission to do so. There will be no shame in that decision. Morrison waited for responses, but none came. Every single crew member remained at their post. Amy Rodriguez spoke for all of them. Sir, we knew what we were signing up for when we joined this crew. We go where you go. Ryan Cooper had finished his preparations for the reactor overload. Captain, all systems are ready. Once I start the sequence, there will be no stopping it. Are you sure about this? Morrison looked at the tactical display showing Admiral Kethmore's ships closing in, the defense grid charging to full power, and the last shuttles lifting off from the moon's surface with the final group of evacuees. 200 people who had been forgotten by the galaxy were now depending on the crew of one human ship to save them. Tony Walsh reported from navigation. Sir, all shuttles are clear of the moon's surface and approaching our position. Pilot Johnson confirms that all survivors have been evacuated. Dr. Park checked her sensors one more time. Captain, the defense grid is at 95% power. If we are going to do this, it has to be now. Morrison took a deep breath and gave the order that would either save everyone or destroy them all. Ryan, initiate reactor overload. Tony, prepare for slingshot maneuver. All hands brace for impact. The Discovery's reactor began building to levels far beyond its design specifications, as energy coursed through systems never meant to handle such power. Throughout the ship, crew members held on to whatever they could find as the vessel prepared for the most dangerous rescue operation in galactic history. Admiral Kethmore's voice came over the communication system one final time. Captain Morrison, what you are attempting is impossible. You will only succeed in destroying yourselves and everyone you are trying to save. Morrison replied without taking his eyes off the energy readings. Admiral, you are about to learn something about humans. We do not know the meaning of the word impossible when people need our help. The UFS Discovery shook violently as engineer Ryan Cooper triggered the reactor overload sequence. Energy levels climbed far beyond anything the ship was designed to handle, while Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair and watched the power readings spike into the red zone. Every system on the ship screamed warnings as the reactor pushed toward critical mass. Tony Walsh counted down from his navigation station. 30 seconds to energy release. All shuttles are secure in the landing bay. Hull stress is approaching maximum tolerance. On the view screen, the ancient defense grid responded to the Discovery's massive energy buildup by powering its weapons to full strength. The orbital platforms began targeting the human ship with weapons that had once destroyed entire fleets during the Galactic War. Energy beams lanced out across space, but they struck the Discovery's shields just as Ryan released the reactor overload. A brilliant pulse of energy erupted from the Discovery's deflector array and struck the central hub of the defense grid. The feedback cascaded through the network exactly as Veltar had predicted, causing every weapons platform to shut down simultaneously. For the first time in 57 years, the prison that had kept the survivors trapped was temporarily disabled. Ryan shouted over the noise of failing systems. Grid is down. 8 minutes until backup power restores the platforms. Tony Walsh immediately engaged the gravitational slingshot maneuver, sending the Discovery diving toward the system's unstable star at a speed that would have torn apart most ships. The hull groaned under stresses it was never meant to endure while gravity pulled them into an increasingly tight spiral around the stellar. Masked Admiral Kethmore's fleet watched in amazement as the human ship executed a maneuver that their own tactical computers declared impossible. The Admiral opened a communication channel to his flag captain. Are they actually attempting to use stellar gravity to exceed light speed without entering hyperspace? His science officer checked the readings twice before responding. Sir, their trajectory and velocity suggest they are going to slingshot around the star and use the gravitational acceleration to escape the system. However, their ship should have been destroyed by now from the structural stress. Admiral Kethmore studied the tactical display with growing respect for human engineering and determination. No other species in the galaxy would have attempted such a desperate rescue mission, and certainly none would have risked everything for refugees they had never met before. Aboard the Discovery, systems were failing throughout the ship as they whipped around the star in a tight arc that pushed the laws of physics to their absolute limits. Dr. Lisa Park monitored the stress readings, while sparks flew from overloaded circuits around her station. Captain, hull integrity is at 15%. We are losing life support on decks 7 through 9. Chief Tactical Officer Ben Carter tried to keep his weapon systems online, in case Admiral Kethmore decided to fire on them during their escape attempt. Sir, most of our defensive systems are offline. If the Galactic Council fleet attacks us now, we have no way to fight back. Morrison made a decision that would later become legendary throughout the galaxy. Amy, open a channel to all the survivors in our shuttle bay. I want them to hear this. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez established the communication link to the refugees who were crowded into every available space in the Discovery's landing areas. Captain, you are connected to all survivor groups. Morrison spoke clearly despite the chaos around him. My name is Jake Morrison, captain of the Earth vessel Discovery. 57 years ago, the galaxy abandoned you in this system and forgot you existed. Today, we are taking you home. Not because it is easy, not because it is safe, but because it is right. Every person deserves rescue when they are in trouble, regardless of their species or their past. In the shuttle bay, Veltar and Threndok listened to the human captain's words through their translators. The scarred Zephyrian looked at his former enemy and spoke quietly. In all our years of war, we never learned what these humans understand naturally. Threndok nodded slowly. They risk everything for strangers because they believe it is the correct thing to do. Perhaps this is why their young species will survive when older civilizations have fallen. The Discovery reached the critical point of its slingshot maneuver and shot away from the star like a projectile fired from an enormous cannon. The ship's velocity exceeded anything it had ever achieved before, carrying them toward the edge of the system at impossible speed. Behind them, the defense grid flickered back to life, but too late to prevent their escape. Tony Walsh announced their success with obvious relief. "We are clear of the system boundary. The slingshot worked. We made it out." Admiral Kethmore's fleet moved to intercept the Discovery as it emerged from the dead zone. But they faced an unexpected situation. The rescued survivors, representing multiple species that had been enemies for generations, formally requested asylum under ancient galactic law. Moreover, they insisted on speaking on behalf of their human rescuers. Beltar's voice came over the communication channels directed at Admiral Kethmore. "We invoke the right of testimony as beings who have been rescued from certain death. These humans violated no law that serves justice. They upheld principles that our own civilizations once claimed to value." Threndock added his own statement. "Admiral Kethmore, we have lived together for 57 years as former enemies who learned to survive by cooperation. These humans showed us that the highest duty of any sentient being is to help others in need. They are guilty of nothing except remembering what it means to be civilized." Other survivors joined their voices to the testimony, creating a chorus of different species all speaking in defense of the human crew that had risked everything to save them. Admiral Kethmore found himself in the unprecedented position of having to decide whether to arrest the rescuers of people who were formally requesting protection. Under galactic law, Dr. Patricia Hill had set up a medical station in one of the cargo bays to treat the survivors who needed immediate attention. As she worked, she listened to their stories about life in the dead zone and how they had learned to overcome centuries of hatred to work together for survival. Discovery of the survivors and their rescue by a human crew became the most significant event in galactic politics in over a century. Captain Morrison's decision to disobey orders and enter the Forbidden Zone created a crisis for the Galactic Council that would reshape interspecies relations. 3 months later, Morrison stood before a tribunal convened to judge his actions. The charges included violation of direct orders, endangering his crew, and illegal entry into forbidden territory. However, the courtroom was filled with the very people he had rescued, all of whom had traveled across the galaxy to testify on his behalf. Veltar spoke for all the survivors when he addressed the tribunal. "Honored judges, we stand before you as living proof that Captain Morrison's actions were not criminal, but heroic. For 57 years we waited for rescue that never came. The galaxy wrote us off as acceptable losses and forgot we existed. Only these humans remembered that every life has value." The tribunal's final judgment became a turning point in galactic civilization. Captain Morrison was cleared of all charges, and the Galactic Council passed the Morrison Doctrine, establishing that humanitarian rescue operations could not be considered violations of territorial restrictions. Morrison's final log entry was broadcast throughout the galaxy and became required reading in military academies across hundreds of worlds. "We did not save them because it was easy. We did not save them because it was safe. We saved them because it was right. And that is what makes us human." The phrase "humans don't leave anyone behind" spread to every corner of galactic civilization, becoming synonymous with the idea that true strength comes not from military power or technological advancement, but from the willingness to risk everything for others in need.